So I have some ties to a, a wireless company that has I in it and wireless and is no longer really around anymore.
Yep, as of this year.
Yeah, it just kind of dissolved. And a majority of these phones are just 2G phones. I have collections of phones. I thought a buddy of mine just gave me these because they had no market value for them anymore, and he just had a collection of them laying around. So
They probably date to about like what, like 5 to 10 years old.
older, I'd say. This one's about 10. This was from 2010. It's 8 years old, and it's what I'll focus in on most. But this one runs on Windows 2006 mobile or mod version 6 mobile, and it's kind of like a cheap ass BlackBerry. It's an HTC. I looked at that one here.
Yeah, probably more like 10 to 20 years old.
Yeah, especially this thing. This thing's old as shit. I'd probably say this one's like at least 15. But it's a really small, nice.
Tiny little Nokia, probably one of the first cell phones not to have an antenna.
Yeah, I mean this is really a pocket phone. I mean, you look at it, it's small, but it's not the clamshell design. It's still the old school one, where all these other ones here have clamshells. And actually, I've played around with this one, and then these two, and these are nice. I like Motorola's, and you can see the model of this one here. This was actually for consumer cellular.
Yeah,
this particular model.
You want to flip it up?
Yep, I will. And I've actually used it, and it has a really nice FM radio built in. And the interface I found with this particular model of a phone, this is like the peak of the flip phone. Huge ass buttons, simple, easy to use interface. You know.
Is that the phone you had like in high school?
No.
Or college?
Nope, none of those. Those, I have one laying around here.
When did you have this one?
When I got it from a buddy of mine who's getting rid of all these phones.
So you never used
None
it
of
as
these are personal phones.
Right, so you never used any of these
No.
as a cell phone.
I just thought these were interesting things worth documenting.
Right.
So I just thought I'd show an additional part of my collection here. These are all on the iWireless network.
How many of these would boot up if you could?
Both of these did. Both of these did. So this one actually still lights up, still loads. It's a cool one. It's a simple one. I think this one was also designed for older people. Look at how big the buttons are.
My dad had a phone like that until the last month, and he used that phone for years. I mean, that was his phone for years. He liked that thing so much he used it until the phone, the ear speaker was worn out, and so the only way to talk to people was to put it automatically on speaker.
Well, and the main reason he got rid of it is the iWireless shutdown.
Yeah,
They're getting rid of 2G.
Yeah, that's the only reason. Like if he hadn't, if iWireless were still around, he'd still be using this phone.
So we got the Moto, the Nokia here, basic one. Look at my big ass fingers to these tiny buttons.
You suppose that one would boot up?
I don't have the charger.
Wonder if maybe that one. Yeah.
If you had the charger, I bet you could. But a lot of these have proprietary chargers. I don't know. You know, this one and this one here and these three had the traditional micro charger, and that made it decent micro USB. This one had some weird ass one, but I did have it charged at one point. So these are again the modals, and this one was a WX345. WX345. This one here is, again, it looks sort of like, has an FM radio. I don't think I got this one to boot up, but it's a cool little one.
It's another Alcatel.
Yep. Personally, I'm not a fan of Alcatel. They're okay, and I don't really think they are around much anymore, because really the market's consolidated with Apple. They get 80-some% of all the profit for phones, and then the Android ones are just left to fight over whatever little scraps they can get.
Yeah. Alcatel was really just kind of a discount phone.
Yeah. Here's another one. This is a Sony Ericsson, and you kind of have a history with it. How many of your phones were Sony Ericsson phones that you had?
2. Okay. I had one that it was kind of like my dad with this one. I really liked and it was, my version was it was red and it was a slider, and I had that model until it broke, and then I got my at the time one of my parents, I forget which one, had an identical phone, and they switched to another phone, and so I took the other Sony Ericsson from them, and I switched the cards and everything, and I used that phone until it broke. So I was pretty loyal to the Sony Ericsson for a few years.
What year or what age was it that you got your first phone?
My first cell phone?
Yeah.
That would have been way back in like '05. We all got these little kind of Kyocera's, and we had cell phones. That would have been when I was in college, and we had those for a while, and then I went without a cell phone for a while. When I moved out to my place, I had a landline. I actually had a landline for a little while, and then in like '09, I got the Sony Ericsson, and I had the Sony Ericsson until maybe 2012, 2011, 2012, and yeah, I was fond of it. I can't tell you completely why. I just kind of liked a lot of the features on it.
Well, before the iPhone and before the whole smartphone craze, texting and slider phones were hot shit. Because like the Razors that I've shown here before, those were pretty popular. I mean, they were kind of the peak of flip phones in a lot of ways. So we talked about all of these. I'm going to end it with the end-all, be-all phone. And I actually really like this phone.
And it's an LG.
It's an LG, and it was on a mobile network, T-Mobile, originally, and it was the first Android phone for T-Mobile. Came out in 2010. It runs Android, I think it's 2.2.
Would this be considered a smartphone?
Yes. See, you slide it. Has a radio, but the radio on these other phones actually works better. It says the weather in the area, date, has a music player. What I like about this compared to new Android, most of this is free and open source software. It's not proprietary. Over the last 8 years, Google systematically exterminated free and open source software and eradicated it from their phones to put it on their proprietary corporate platform. And it made it shiny and nice too. I mean, it does run better, you know, but you surrender your sovereignty to your corporate overlords. Where here, that was just a component of it. You know, they hadn't built the corporate Death Star of, you know, search and destroy. This was still kind of in its infancy. You can see the apps here. You got your Facebook spyware, your gallery, where now it's Google Photos, which is nice because you can delete them, but you don't have the redundancy in the backup of it. Your Messenger app, your navigation, your phone, you got your Twitter. It runs kind of slow and shitty, but I mean, probably for the price and just this is a groove of good Android, you know, because it had all that going for it. I think that helped kind of kickstart that market. And then to me, it's really not a smartphone until Motorola builds a smartphone. You know, Apple created the market, I would say. I think Steve Jobs creates markets, but then people who can actually make shit competitively and create markets do stuff like this. So it's pretty chill. It shows you the date and all that. You can put an SD card in. Didn't really have a lot of storage. Had Google, you could search, but the keyboard's weird as shit. I would have liked it just to be traditional. You see how it looks like it's just a traditional.
Yeah, that was back when it was hard to write.
Just give me fucking ABCs, man. I don't want, you know.
We had to like press it once for J, twice for K, 3 times for L.
Hate that shit.
Yeah, that's what my dad had to deal with this phone.
Did he actually text though?
very short messages, and like, but you know, it's funny. It made it more meaningful when you got a message from him, like especially like one that you could tell took him a while to write. Like sometimes he would send you something about, you know, something going on, or some kind of a joke, you know,
Yeah.
text you some kind of a joke, and in the back of your mind, you'd kind of think, you know, that took him probably 5 minutes to write, whereas it would take me a few seconds to write.
Yeah.
But it took him 5 minutes of his life to just write that so that he could send it to you and, you know, make you laugh. It kind of made the text more meaningful because you knew that it was more effort when it went into it. It's kind of one of those things about technology that people don't often, especially outdated technology that people don't consider, is that, yeah, back in the past, it was harder to do certain things, but the fact that it was harder in some ways made those things more meaningful. You know, like somebody sending you a telegraph. I mean, imagine that.
Stop.
Yeah. So.
But it was interesting with that, because my dad had a flip phone. His was a track phone, flip phone. He had that for years and years and years.
And I think the first time I saw him, he had that phone.
Yeah.
And then you gave him a Moto.
I gave him a sliding one. That was his interim one.
Yeah, and then he got the Moto, right?
Yeah, I bought that Moto. It's a Moto E for $3,000. We did $300. $3,000 for a piece of shit phone.
And he still has the Moto now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
His first smartphone, and good shot it will probably be his last, because I think he'll just run it until it won't work anymore.
Which is interesting because he's an engineer, so you would almost think that he'd be into like new technology
He
and
hates
stuff,
technology.
but he hates it.
Yeah, like growing up, like I grew up pretty affluent with a lot of crazy engineers and people who would just piss money away. Like they had so much of it that they didn't know what the fuck to do with it. Not our household, but the neighborhood. And they would build these custom computers. They'd have fucking Japanese slot machines in their basement. I mean, it would just be out of control, like the kind of stuff. And then we grew up with dial-up internet up until I was in high school, and pretty basic computers. And the last computer Dad got, I actually bought for him at a refurbished store. Before that, he had a Windows XP machine. And yeah, I mean, he really only gets an upgrade when I do the initiative to upgrade it.
So he's kind of similar to my dad in that way. Why do you think he would be that way? I mean, considering his line of work was to basically advance technology and, you know.
Yeah, well, he was an electrical engineer.
Right, build like cockpits for commercial
Display
jets.
systems.
Yeah.
So
So
they
you would
would,
like why did he feel that way about technology?
He worked with it in days. He didn't give a shit about it.
So he got kind of sick of it, you think? Or?
I think he was a cheap person in a lot of ways. And
So
I
it was
think
more just being frugal.
Yeah,
wanting
but
to
he's
be
like he could settle with good enough. Now, I don't know. I think you dude and your dad can have a certain standard of good enough. You know, I was impressed with how technology-wise you were able to settle with a phone that you couldn't hit the back button with. If that was me, I would throw that fucking thing on the wall and it would be in pieces, and I'd have something different. But I'm more low on my tolerance of that shit, except for clocks. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he never liked spending money, but that probably helped him retire early and do a lot of other stuff because he didn't spend money on that shit, because he just realized he knew Moore's law, and every 18 months the shit gets better and cheaper.
Yeah.
You know, like the first 3 computers he owned, they were like $2,000 a piece.
And now he can afford a monster truck.
And then the last computer, the one that I bought him, it was $200, and it was better than any computer he ever had, and it was already like 5 years old at that age. You know.
Yeah.
So.
I believe in being kind of a late adopter. You know,
Yeah.
let people kind of work the bugs out. I didn't get a smartphone until a few years ago, and it was mainly because, well, it was partly just kind of inertia. Like, you know, I had the Ericsson, and I was like, I don't want to get something new when I have this. But it was partly that, and then I think our phone plan didn't really have data anyway, so there was no real point. But yeah, let other people kind of get the bugs worked out, and then what you end up with, you may have had to wait another few years, but you get the best version of it instead of some crappy version that doesn't work.
I've never had data.
interesting.
Yeah, I never have had data. I have internet in my apartment here that's unlimited on a fiber optic line.
Yeah. It comes in handy when you're like when you're somewhere and you want to get online. The number of restaurants that I can go to now has increased quite a bit because I can go to restaurants that don't have Wi-Fi and I can just turn on the hotspot feature and have my own personal Wi-Fi. And then of course being out in the country, out on the farm, it's kind of a godsend because it basically allows you to have home internet. And you know, most unlimited data plans, what I've heard is that they call it unlimited, but it's really like about 25 gigs.
Then they throttle it to dial speed.
Throttle it down. I still haven't run out. Like I've had it for over a month, and I never ran out of. So I must the amount that I use the internet, it must be sparingly enough that I don't run out of data.
Well, I think you've conserved it because you're so used to not having a lot of it, so you know all the places to go that you can offload it to wireless.
I think the last month, the first month that I had it was probably the month that I would use it, that I used it the most because I just had a bunch of apps I wanted to download and stuff. But I pretty much slowed down, so like this last month was probably the highest I'll ever go, which is about 20 gigs or something like that. I'll probably from now on probably use less than that every month.
And I usually hit on my home internet somewhere between 100 and 200 gigabytes of data that I download.
Gigabytes?
Yes.
Wow.
You do 20, I do 100 to 200.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That's nothing. There's people I've seen that hit 11 terabytes.
Well, that's when they're doing. That's when they're kind of
uploading a lot of content and forwarding all this shit.
Yeah, like the entire series of Game of Thrones and shit like that.
Or working from home.
Yeah, that's.
You're doing intensive activities because you got a VPN rolling, you got a VoIP phone system, and then you got all your shit that you'd want on there anyhow, and you run it there. Yeah, and that's interesting because you've never had home internet. You've always had cellular. You never paid anybody to give you a.
Never paid anyone.
Yeah.
Nope. There was a year or two where I basically piggybacked off of someone else's Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And then I just having it through my phone, but I've never paid a, what would you call it, a provider.
Internet service provider.
Yeah, I've never paid one of them, and I haven't lived in a house with cable since 1995.
Wow. So.
But which is turning out okay now because cable is becoming less and less relevant anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of been obsolete because of the internet. It's priced itself out of the market. But yeah, so that's interesting on just how our internet consumption style and behaviors are. Mine,
a friend of ours warned me about not using too much, and I was like, holy shit, I would never use that much. Like he was talking about, oh, they only give you this much, and it was so funny because to me that seemed like plenty.
Yeah.
But to him it sounded like a paltry amount,
Yeah, fucking bastards! They cap your data. So.
Yeah. So, anything more you'd like to say about any of these phones?
No, I think
this one's was kind of just probably like just before smartphones came out.
Yeah.
They were starting to do that. I had a couple of phones like this, and of all of the cell phones I had, I liked them the least.
Yeah, I don't like that one too much. I'm gonna look it up really quick because it was it was Windows Mobile 6. And I'm going to just look up the year that was made because I don't remember.
Two megapixel camera, woohoo!
I think some of those actually have 3. Some of those flip phones. It came out in February 2007.
Huh.
And I think that the iPhone came out around September of 2007.
Yeah.
So they're like, here's the poor man's BlackBerry. And then they're like, here's a phone, an iPod, an internet communication device. And all for $500,000. You know, now the new iPhones that came out, they start at like $1,100, and they still have people who buy them. You know,
Yeah.
I don't even think it fuels innovation. It just fuels sweatshop exploitation and greedy profiteering. But a lot of those fuckers that have iPhones that are dropping $1,000 on them, they're the first people that are going to talk about all these liberal progressive causes that they say they care about, while at the same time, you know what I mean? They're fueling sweatshops and, you know, corporate greed. They gave a bunch of tax money in Iowa to Apple to just put a fucking data center up and maybe give, what, a couple dozen jobs for $50 million in tax credits? And then you're going to give them $1,000 for a shitty phone?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people they don't think that extra couple of steps. It's kind of sad. It's like, you know, everybody thinks they have principles but they really, at the end of the day, they don't. They just kind of have, it's all kind of fashion.
It's aesthetics and bullshit. It's whatever's fashionably available. You know, whatever they feel it's gonna get them.
Everything, like, even it's seeped into advertisement. Like, everybody's like, take a stand, you know, and the stand is like, you're not taking a stand by deciding what kind of laundry detergent to buy.
Oh wow.
You know, shit like that. It's like, you know, it's kind of reminds me of Fight Club, where the guy was talking about what coffee table reflects me best as a person.
Oh.
That kind of thing, where it's like, none of it should say anything about you, really. Like, it's okay to have morals and stuff and ethics, but when you're not really smart enough to think that stuff through in a complete way, you might as well just kind of give up on it, because the conclusions that you draw are always going to be flawed. I know I'm I know this is really turning into an uplifting cell phone video, but it's like you're too stupid to make the world a better place, so you might as well give up.
Wow. Wow.
But anyway, cell phones. You know, a lot of people would think of these as crap, as junk, outdated. They would laugh at them. But you know what? They paved the way for what you have now. So...
And to go back to two of them, the one on the far right, the two at the bottom, the one that is the HTC and LG, those two.
Yeah.
Those two, I really think, are kind of the peak, in some ways, the end of an era. You know, the HTC is the end of the BlackBerry, big-ass keyboard, corporate exec era, and the Android one there is kind of the start of the Android era. It's really the first one, but then as we look at it, my current one that I'm really happy about, it runs Android 8.0, and that other one was 2.2, the one that we see there, that's Android. It's like a totally different world, and can do all these cool things, but like I said earlier, you surrender your freedom to the Google corporate overload store and all that. But I think I beat this dead horse to the ground pretty good. Anything else you want to add?
No, we'll take this final group photo. It'll make a nice thumbnail. We probably should have been displaying them this way the whole time with the phones open like that, but that's cool. We'll just shoot this for the thumbnail so that people can see them clearly. And yeah, this turned into a documentary.
How long has it been?
Yeah, it's been over a half an hour.
Jesus, that time flew.
Yeah, so cool.